Punk Revolution now. Today we're gonna be reviewing Darkside's newest album, Spiral. Darkside is a really cool project. It's a collaboration between Nicolas Jaar, you might have already listened to some Nicolas Jaar, he's a very accomplished musician, and David Harrington, two very cool musicians. Nicolas Jaar, like I said, you might have already listened to him before, maybe without even realizing it. He's the guy behind the project Against All Logic. You might have seen or heard Against All Logic in the past few years because they released a couple albums that it's pretty dope. It's like really fun and interesting and experimental house music with a little bit of IDM in there too. So, you know, Nicolas Jaar is a freaking great producer, and Nicolas Jaar has also released some electronic music under his own name that's like kind of like experimental ambient electronic, very talented. And then of course with Darkside, this is a project that's already gotten quite a lot of acclaim and attention as well. So Nicolas Jaar, very successful. We already know Nicolas Jaar is very talented. And then David Harrington, honestly not as familiar with David Harrington as Nicolas Jaar, so I checked out some of his stuff before reviewing this album, and it seems like he's really into making like experimental rock and post-rock and maybe even like sort of like jazz fusion-y experimental rock. Cool stuff. Two talented musicians coming together in Darkside. We know they're capable of making really cool music because Darkside, like I said, has released some cool fucking albums, so I'm excited to see what they're up to now in Spiral. Let's start by taking a look at the album cover. Hi everybody. How do you feel about some album artwork analysis ASMR? So this is out. Okay, I don't like this. So this album cover, it's cool. I mean, it's like a ball of water that's like kind of reflecting some grass and trees. I don't really know what the frick this ball is. Maybe it's photoshopped. Maybe it's like an actual glass ball that's like reflective. They kind of put down in some forest or whatever and took a picture. Kind of reminds me of their album artwork for their album Psychic, another magical ball. It just looks magical, okay? Kind of a dark ball. I have one of those. So that's a cool album cover. Not too much to say, but it's cool. I'm fascinated. Let's talk about the music. Musically, this is a really unique album, and honestly, it caught me off guard. Like, the first time I listened to this album, I didn't really enjoy it that much because I think I went into it with the wrong mindset. Like, I think I went into it kind of expecting, like, you know, a pretty catchy, fun art pop album that's also pretty experimental. But what I actually got was an album that was a lot more like atmospheric and ambient, where a lot more of like the emotion and creativity is gonna come through in like the production and the atmosphere, and you're gonna want to listen to this with like some really expensive headphones so you can really appreciate and hear it all. Like if you got like expensive headphones and you want to see what those headphones are capable of, maybe this is a good album to check that out, because there's so many cool little details here and there, nice, beautiful, satisfying textures. That's all great, but like I said, very atmospheric. You don't want to listen to this like on AirPods on a bus on the way to class or something, because you're gonna hardly be able to kind of pick up what's going on. In terms of the actual like influences and genres I would categorize this album as, that's actually a pretty tricky question, because at times I'm listening to this album and it does feel like it's more of like an electronic album. Like, of course, you know, it's Nicolas Jaar, that's his specialty, and in this album, like I said, the creativity is really driven by the outstanding production. Certainly gives off some electronic vibes, especially with like the synths and organs and the percussion. It definitely does feel a bit electronic, but at the same time, you can definitely feel like this project seems like a project that actually could be performed live by like actual musicians with like guitars and bass and keyboards and a drummer and a vocalist. Like, it sounds like the most like organic live band acoustic sort of project I've really heard from Nicolas Jaar, and that's a really interesting thing. It perfectly blends the line between electronic and rock. And while the vocals and some of these synths definitely feel like they're from a very like neo-psychedelic kind of like indie pop era, like late 2000s, early 2010s, I do feel like the instrumentation here actually is diving into some really creative genres, maybe with the David Harrington kind of experimental rock background. I'm definitely hearing some elements of like post-rock and kind of like a bark psychosis and talk sense, where everything is just so subtle, like just a gentle, maybe a little like guitar strum here, maybe a little synth that comes in here. Everything is so subtle. Seems like a lot of these songs actually have some very subtle, gentle improvisation that actually kind of reminds me even a bit of like jazz fusion, like maybe like Miles Davis or something like that. And a lot of these riffs, the way that they're like kind of improvising and the way they incorporate like psychedelic elements and the way a lot of it is just so rhythmic, it does actually actually does come off a lot like prog rock. Like the song Inside Is Out There, you listen to those drums, it sounds like you're listening to just a canned song with, you know, that awesome percussion that's really driving it, and then around the percussion they've got all these cool instruments kind of like, you know, coming in and jamming. It's almost like freaking you're listening to like Miles Davis conduct King Gizzard on a jazz fusion song, which is pretty dope. So when I think about it, this is like a album that really blends the line between rock and electronic with like prog rock and psychedelic and krautrock and post-rock and jazz fusion influence, and that's a pretty fucking cool project for sure. You don't see too many projects nowadays really exploring and kind of mastering those genres as well as Darkside does. But even though those are really cool genres, like I said, I don't think this is going to be an album that's immediately enjoyable to everyone, even people who do enjoy prog rock and experimental rock, just because of how much it does indulge in atmosphere and just kind of allowing the production to shine, really prioritizing the production over songwriting, which I think really does hurt the album, because there are a few tracks here and there throughout this album, like Lawmaker and Liberty Bell, where you're gonna get like a riff or like a vocal melody that's gonna have some repetition, that's gonna have some lyrics that you're gonna really be able to grab onto and really kind of maybe even sort of like hum along to. I think those are the best tracks. But then like 70% of this album is a lot more like instrumental, a lot more ambient. Even the vocals that do come in throughout this album, a lot of them feel more like they function more as like an instrument rather than like being up front as like the lead melody that's gonna really drive the song. And of course, if you're experimenting with these really interesting and unique genres and creating a kind of a cool experimental release, that's cool if not all of it is as conventionally driven by a melody. But I gotta say, like, I wish the ratio was flipped, because right now the ratio is like 60-70% kind of like an instrumental atmospheric vibe, and then maybe like 30-40% a little bit more conventional with like a catchy riff or catchy melody. I wish it was flipped, where it was like 75% driven by like a catchy riff, catchy melody, and then the remainder had maybe more instrumental tracks that were a little bit more jammy. Because in songs like Lawmaker, even though it has like a driving riff and melody, there's still plenty of room in the mix for plenty of improvisation and experimentation. You hear plenty of that, but at least you have some like memorable like riff driving the song to kind of help you stay captivated. When you get super into like the ambient, meandering, atmospheric, production-driven stuff, it's kind of hard for you to maintain your focus, especially for an album that's over 50 minutes long. I mean, think about it, like Can's album Tago Mago, that's like just packed with plenty of really weird psychedelic experimentation and stuff, but like the majority of those songs have like riffs and like passionate vocal performances that you just like that are just so captivating. This album really lacks, for the most part, any like captivating, super driven thing. Like I said, it's something you want to like, if you're listening to, you gotta like really focus, and when you focus, you're gonna hear plenty of beauty, plenty of talent, and there's plenty of really awesome creative ideas and riffs and lyrics and plenty of awesome stuff in here. I just wish it kind of forced your attention a little bit more and wasn't as like subdued and laid back, because it's not one that that's not gonna really create an album that's gonna really make you want to revisit it too often if it's not like really capturing your attention as much. But I'm still like really impressed with this unique blend of influences, the unique way it really blurs the line between rock and electronic. I mean, come on, like krautrock, jazz fusion, psychedelic, electronic rock, whatever the fuck, pop crap, whatever. I mean, it's cool. It's a cool blend of genres, great production. Put that together, it's a solid album. I'm giving this a 7.6 out of 10. Not for everyone. It's got its issues. I think it's gonna be polarizing. I think some people are gonna be just find the production so astounding that they're gonna love it, and I think other people are gonna be like, man, that was fucking boring. So maybe consider which one you think you might fall into and check it out if you think that sounds appealing to you. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. 7.6 out of 10. Cool stuff. Thanks for everyone liking, comment, subscribing. It helps the algorithm so more people find my videos. Thank you so much for watching. Punk Revolution. No.